Before the heavens learned to hold the sun, before names were fixed to gods, and the world began to count its days, there existed a depth that had no opposite. It was not darkness, for darkness implies the absence of light. This depth had never known light at all. Here, beneath the layered earth and the slow-forming sky, stood the realm that would one day be called Irkalla. It did not wait. It did not hunger. It simply existed, and within it ruled Ereshkigal. She was not crowned. She did not ascend. Her power was not taken nor granted. It settled upon her the moment the world divided itself into what rises and what descends, while others shaped the heavens, while winds learned their paths and waters learned their limits. Ereshkigal remained below, receiving what fell naturally into her domain. She did not choose the underworld. The underworld chose her. In the earliest age, death was not feared. It was not yet understood. Things ended because they had completed their movement, not because they had failed to endure. Leaves fell when their time was finished. Breath left the body when its work was done, and all that ended found its way downward. Ereshkigal did not greet them. She did not judge them. She acknowledged them. Her presence was vast and unmoving, like stone that has never known fracture. She did not speak often, for Irkalla was not a place of explanation. It was a place of arrival. Above her, far beyond the layered gates, the world of the living unfolded with increasing noise. Gods argued over domains. Mortals learned to fear loss. Stories began to exaggerate what could not be controlled, but none of that reached her. Ereshkigal's realm was sealed not by force, but by finality. Once something entered, it no longer needed direction. She did not sit upon a throne. She stood, or rather, she remained. Her authority was not action, but inevitability. Time did not move through Irkalla as it did above. It did not progress. It accumulated. Moments did not pass here. They settled. Ereshkigal learned every silence intimately. She felt the weight of each ending without absorbing its emotion. Grief belonged to the living. Below, there was only stillness. Yet she was not untouched. To be the final witness of all things is to understand the cost of existence. She knew what it meant to hold without holding on, to rule without interference, to remain while everything else changed. And though she would one day be spoken of as fear, as punishment, as shadow, in this first age, she was simply balance, the quiet answer to the world's movement. And long before the gods above would descend to test her gates, long before her name would be spoken with hesitation, Ereshkigal stood alone in Irkalla, holding the place where all journeys end. Irkalla was not entered all at once. It revealed itself through passage. 7 gates stood between the living world and the realm below, each one unmoving, each one older than the fear that would later surround it. They were not built to repel. They were built to measure. Every soul that descended arrived with weight, not of the body, but of identity. was left behind, not taken by force, released by necessity. Ereshkigal did not watch the gates closely. She did not need to. They obeyed the same law that governed her realm. Nothing passes unchanged. When the first souls arrived, they came quietly, uncertain but unresisting. At the first gate, titles loosened. At the second, names faded. At the third, memories softened. With each threshold, what defined them above lost its urgency. This was not cruelty. It was preparation. Irkalla did not permit excess. Nothing unnecessary could remain. Ereshkigal understood this better than any other being. She had been shaped by descent itself. Above, gods wore authority like armor. Below, authority was weight, earned by endurance, maintained by stillness. She stood at the center of the realm, not to oversee movement, but to ensure its completion. No soul wandered aimlessly here. Once the final gate was crossed, movement ceased. Ereshkigal did not promise comfort. She promised rest. And rest, she knew, could feel frightening to those who had never stopped striving. Occasionally, echoes reached her. Gods above speaking of balance, of cycles, of order. They spoke as though they understood, but they did not descend. They did not feel the pressure of finality settle into the bones of existence. Ereshkigal did. She did not resent those above. Resentment required comparison. Irkalla was incomparable. Here, the world was complete because it no longer needed continuation. The gates closed behind each arrival without sound, without final announcement. They did not seal in punishment. They sealed in certainty. And Ereshkigal remained, the only being who did not pass through any gate, because she was the destination. Stillness in Irkalla was not absence. It was presence held in place. Nothing rushed here. Nothing decayed too quickly. Nothing sought escape. Time did not move forward. It settled. Souls who arrived often expected judgment. They waited for voices, for verdicts, for scales or fire or punishment. None came. Ereshkigal did not judge. Judgment required choice, and in Irkalla, choice had already ended. What arrived had already lived. The realm did not erase them. It equalized them. Kings and servants stood the same way. Heads lowered, not in shame, but in release. Above, power demanded effort. Below, effort dissolved. Ereshkigal moved rarely, but when she did, the realm shifted around her. Not because she commanded it, but because it recognized her. She walked the inner chambers where no souls lingered, where the foundations of the underworld rested. Here, the air was heavier, not suffocating, but complete. This was where even gods would struggle to stand. Once, long ago, she had struggled too. Before the realm accepted her fully, before the gates aligned, before Irkalla learned her name. She remembered that pressure, the moment when descent becomes irreversible. It was not fear she felt then. It was surrender. That surrender shaped her rule. She did not seek worship. She did not seek praise. She accepted presence. Occasionally, a soul resisted. They clung to memory, to regret, to the echo of unfinished words. Those souls did not scream. They simply remained heavier. Ereshkigal did not intervene. The realm itself would teach them. Stillness was not forced here. It was learned. And once learned, it became peace. Above, gods argued about fate. Below, fate had already arrived and laid itself down. Ereshkigal stood at the heart of that quiet, not as a captor, but as the keeper of what remains after all movement ends. There came a moment when even Irkalla felt a disturbance. Not a rebellion, not an intrusion, a hesitation. It arrived before the soul itself did. A subtle imbalance at the first gate. Ereshkigal sensed it immediately. This presence carried divinity, not borrowed, not remembered, living. A goddess approached the underworld. Such events were not forbidden. They were simply rare. Above, gods believed descent was temporary. Below, descent was always final. The gates recognized the difference. At the first gate, the goddess paused. She expected resistance. There was none, only a quiet exchange. Something was surrendered, not demanded. Adornment, perhaps. A symbol of power, a certainty. The gates did not care what was given, only that something was. Ereshkigal waited in silence. She did not rush to meet the arrival. She understood the process. 7 gates would speak before any words were exchanged. At each threshold, the goddess changed, not weakened, clarified. The confidence she carried above thinned into awareness. The final gate opened without ceremony, and the goddess entered Irkalla as no longer what she had been, but not yet what she would become. Ereshkigal stood facing her. No throne separated them. No guards intervened. Only space. Only gravity. You have come willingly, Ereshkigal said, not as question, but observation. The goddess did not answer immediately. Words behaved differently here. Yes, she replied at last, and the words sounded heavier than intention. Ereshkigal did not smile. She did not frown. She understood. Dissent was never about curiosity. It was about necessity, and necessity always reshaped those who answered it. Above, the heavens remained unaware. Below, Irkalla adjusted. A goddess had crossed its threshold, and nothing that enters Irkalla remains untouched. The presence of the goddess did not disturb Irkalla at once. Change here was never sudden. It unfolded slowly, like stone remembering pressure. Ereshkigal observed in silence. The visitor stood still, no longer advancing, no longer retreating. This was the moment Irkalla always demanded, the pause between intention and acceptance. Above, gods acted. Below, beings understood. You have crossed the gates, Ereshkigal said softly. You have surrendered what they required. The goddess nodded, though uncertainty flickered beneath her calm. And yet, Ereshkigal continued, you still carry expectation. Expectation foundation was heavier than armor. It had no place here. In Irkalla, nothing was owed. Nothing was promised. The goddess felt it then, the pressure not on her body, but on her identity. Power did not vanish in the underworld. It became irrelevant. This was the law no god learned willingly. Ereshkigal did not enforce it. She embodied it. "Why have you come?" she asked. The answer came slowly. "To understand," the goddess said. "To change what must change." Ereshkigal regarded her carefully. Change was rare here, but not impossible. Irkalla was not frozen. It was balanced. Those who came seeking control found only stillness. Those who came seeking truth found weight. Ereshkigal stepped aside, gesturing toward the deeper chambers. "Then you will remain," she said, "until you no longer ask why." The goddess followed. Behind them, the gates did not close. They settled. Above, the world continued unaware. Below, a lesson older than heaven began to unfold. The deeper chambers of Irkalla did not welcome footsteps. They absorbed them. Sound here did not echo. It dissolved, as if the stone itself chose what should be remembered. The goddess walked beside Ereshkigal, her presence lighter now, as though the underworld had already begun its quiet work. "This place listens," Ereshkigal said, her voice barely stirring the air. "But it never answers quickly." They passed pillars worn smooth by centuries of waiting souls. No cries, no pleading, only patience. The goddess felt something unfamiliar, not fear, not sorrow, but the slow erosion of urgency. Above, prayers demanded response. Below, time had no obligation. "What becomes of those who linger?" the goddess asked. Ereshkigal did not turn. "They learn," she said, "or they become part of the silence." Ahead, a chamber opened wide, its ceiling lost in shadow, its floor traced with faint lines like dried rivers. "This is where choices settle," Ereshkigal explained. "No judgment, no reward." The goddess stepped forward and felt it immediately. The weight of every decision she had ever made, not as guilt, but as consequence. Irkalla did not punish. It clarified. Here, power was measured by endurance, wisdom by restraint. Ereshkigal finally faced her. "You were worshipped," she said gently. "You were invoked." "Yes," the goddess replied. "And yet," Ereshkigal continued, "you were never understood." The goddess lowered her gaze. In that moment, something shifted, not in Irkalla, but within her. To remain was not imprisonment. It was refinement. Ereshkigal turned away once more. "When you no longer seek to be seen," she said, "this place will know what to do with you." The chamber dimmed, and for the first time, the silence felt attentive. The disturbance did not arrive as sound. It arrived as imbalance. Far above Irkalla, where light still remembered the sun, a name was spoken too often, too urgently. Prayers pressed downward like unseen rain, seeping through cracks between worlds. Ereshkigal felt it before the walls did. she stopped. The goddess beside her paused as well, sensing the shift without understanding it. Something stirs, the goddess whispered. Ereshkigal closed her eyes. When the living speak too loudly, she said, the dead are forced to listen. The underworld did not reject prayer. It absorbed it, slowly, relentlessly. A faint vibration moved through the stone floor, not violent, but persistent. This is how imbalance begins, Ereshkigal explained. Not with chaos, with insistence. The goddess remembered the world above. Altars crowded with offerings, voices pleading for reversal, for mercy, for escape from consequence. They do not accept endings, the goddess said quietly. No, Ereshkigal agreed. They bargain with them. They entered a narrower passage, its walls etched with ancient symbols worn nearly smooth. These marks, Ereshkigal said, were carved by those who believed devotion could undo fate. The goddess traced one with her fingers. It crumbled at her touch. Nothing is undone here, Ereshkigal continued, only understood. The vibration strengthened like a distant pulse. Somewhere above, a god interfered where they should not. Ereshkigal's expression remained calm, but the air grew heavier. When gods refuse balance, she said, the underworld must respond. The goddess looked at her. And what does Irkalla do? She asked, when even the heavens forget restraint. Ereshkigal turned, her gaze steady. It waits, she answered, and then it teaches. The passage opened once more, leading toward chambers long sealed. The tremor followed them, and for the first time since the goddess had entered Irkalla, the underworld prepared to act. The sealed doors did not resist. They remembered. As Ereshkigal approached, the ancient stone responded, not with sound, but with recognition. These doors had been closed since the first boundary was drawn between breath and silence, between ending and continuation. The goddess felt the air change. It grew denser, as if the underworld itself was inhaling. You have never opened these, the goddess said quietly. Ereshkigal placed her hand upon the stone. Because nothing beyond them forgets, she replied, and nothing that remembers wishes to return. The tremor from above reached its peak here. Prayers, demands, defiance, all pressing downward, seeking exception. The doors shifted, not fully, just enough. From the narrow opening came no light, only awareness. The goddess staggered slightly, not from force, but from recognition. She saw moments without sequence, lives unfinished, promises half kept, souls clinging to meaning long after meaning had passed. Irkalla did not judge them. It preserved them. This is what happens, Ereshkigal said, her voice steady. When endings are denied, the goddess steadied herself. Above, gods reshaped fate with stories. Below, consequence waited patiently. The doors halted their movement. Ereshkigal withdrew her hand. That is enough, she said. The balance remembers how to hold. The tremor softened, then faded. Somewhere above, a god fell silent. The doors sealed once more, not with finality, but with relief. The goddess exhaled. I did not know, she admitted. No one does, Ereshkigal replied, until they stand where silence keeps record. They turned away together. Irkalla settled back into stillness. But the underworld was no longer merely waiting. It had been reminded of its purpose. The silence that followed was different. It was not the familiar stillness of Irkalla, but a listening silence, as though the underworld itself had leaned closer to the edge of the worlds above. Ereshkigal stood unmoving. The goddess beside her felt it clearly now. The balance had shifted, and with it, the awareness of those who believed themselves untouched. Above, the living paused mid-prayer, not because they were answered, but because something had answered back. Not in words, but in weight. This is rare, the goddess murmured, that they feel you. Ereshkigal's expression did not change. They always feel the underworld, she said. They simply refuse to name it. Irkalla did not send messages. It sent certainty. A quiet heaviness settled into the chambers, like dust finding its final resting place. Somewhere above, a god hesitated. A mortal accepted an ending without protest. A soul loosened its grip on memory. These were not acts of submission. They were acts of alignment. Ereshkigal began to walk again, and the goddess followed, now slower, now quieter. You will return, Ereshkigal said without looking back, not above, but onward. The goddess understood. Not all journeys lead upward. Some deepen. At the threshold of the final chamber, Ereshkigal stopped. This is where Irkalla releases what no longer resists, she said. The goddess felt herself lighten, not disappear, but settle into place. I will remember this, she said. Ereshkigal inclined her head. That is enough. The underworld exhaled, and for the first time since the first gate was sealed, Irkalla was not merely endured, it was respected. Nothing announced the ending. Irkalla did not mark conclusions with sound or sign. It simply continued, unchanged, unhurried. Ereshkigal stood alone now. The goddess had gone onward, not returned above, not erased, but folded gently into the order that waits beneath all things. This was the truth few understood. The underworld did not consume. It received. Ereshkigal walked the familiar halls, stone remembering her footsteps, silence recognizing its keeper. Above lives unfolded. Below, meaning settled. No gates opened, no doors closed. Balance did not require motion. At the deepest chamber, Ereshkigal paused, resting her hand against the cool stone. Here, time did not pass. It rested. She listened, not for prayers, not for defiance, but for the quiet moment when acceptance replaced resistance. Somewhere, a soul exhaled. Somewhere, a god chose restraint. Somewhere, a mortal let go. Irkalla held them all. Ereshkigal turned, her presence dissolving once more into the underworld itself, other tremors, other visitors, other lessons, but the law would remain. And if you listen closely, in the space between one breath and the next, you may feel it too. That steady calm beneath the world, waiting patiently as it always has. The silence does not end. It simply returns you to where the story began.